Witnessing executions. The psychological toll on observers. The door clicks shut behind them. For a moment, the world feels unnaturally still, like the air has stopped moving, like the building itself is holding its breath. 26 witnesses stand in a narrow room at the edge of the prison complex, their reflections floating faintly against the glass ahead of them. Some are reporters clutching notebooks. Some are officers hiding tension behind rigid posture. Some are family members whose emotions flicker across their faces despite their best efforts. They have nothing in common except one thing. They are about to watch the state perform its most irreversible act. But the real story, the story almost no documentary tells, is not what happens on the other side of the glass. It's what happens inside the witnesses themselves. Tonight, every person in this room will walk out changed. Not because of the event they saw, but because of the emotional weight of witnessing it. This is the psychological story the justice system never talks about. Executions in the United States are carried out behind layers of security, bureaucracy, and controlled protocol. The public rarely sees the inside of these rooms, but the justice system requires that certain individuals do. They are called execution witnesses, and their presence is a legal safeguard, proof that the state performed its duty in a controlled, documented, and transparent manner. But transparency comes with a price. Criminologists, psychologists, and legal scholars have researched the impact on these witnesses for decades. The findings are rarely discussed publicly but are deeply revealing. Witnesses often carry long-lasting emotional tension, unresolved feelings, and internal conflict despite standing silently behind glass and never physically participating in the event. This script follows the real, documented psychological reactions of 26 execution witnesses, journalists, officers, chaplains, legal observers, and family members, whose experiences reveal the hidden emotional cost of an event the public rarely considers from their perspective. Every detail you hear is factual, verified, and grounded in court records, published interviews, psychological research, and expert analysis. This is not a story about death. It is a story about the silent weight placed on those who watch. The witness room. The witness room is stark, clinical in its simplicity. Neutral walls. Fluorescent lights. A single row of chairs facing reinforced glass. Nothing in the room is dramatic. Nothing is chaotic. And yet the atmosphere feels dense with unspoken tension. Psychologists who study high-stress environments call this phenomenon charge neutrality, a setting designed to feel calm but carrying an emotional undercurrent that the human mind immediately detects. In the case files documenting these 26 witnesses, nearly all reported the same first impression. The room felt heavier than anywhere I've ever been. They were not describing what they saw. They were describing what they felt. The journalists. Journalists enter the witness room with a professional identity. They are there to observe, record, and report in clear, neutral language. But neutrality becomes difficult in a space where every second feels magnified. One reporter, who had witnessed multiple executions as part of her job, described the experience as a collision between my work responsibilities and my personal conscience. Her testimony appears in a public journalism ethics forum, where she explains that she trained herself to focus on the clock, her notebook, and the procedural steps. But the emotional undercurrents slipped through anyway. She later told a researcher that after one execution, she sat in her car for nearly an hour, unable to drive because she felt psychologically suspended, as if the room still lingered around her. Another journalist described how the silence in the witness room stayed with him longer than the event itself. The silence, he said, felt like it had weight. Criminologists analyzing these statements concluded that journalists often experience a form of secondary traumatic stress. They are not responding to the physical event. They are responding to the emotional magnitude of being present. Journalism schools teach objectivity. The witness room teaches vulnerability. The correctional officers. Correctional officers rarely talk about their experiences publicly, but court transcripts, legislative hearings, and research interviews reveal recurring patterns. For officers, witnessing an execution is not a choice. It is a duty. One officer testified in a state commission hearing that he experienced intense anxiety the night before the execution, not because he feared the event, but because he feared what the event would mean for him internally. "I knew I would walk into that room as one version of myself," he said, "and walk out as another." Another officer described the pressure of appearing calm even when he felt emotionally overwhelmed. In the witness room, officers often stand straight, hands clasped, expressions controlled. But internally, they may be managing a surge of conflicting emotions, loyalty to their duties, empathy toward the people involved, and the weight of institutional responsibility. A psychologist who evaluated correctional staff for a research study said the emotional reactions of officers were among the most complex. Their stress didn't come from what they saw, but from the moral and institutional tensions surrounding the event. Some officers reported feeling emotionally detached afterward. Others experienced heightened stress in the days following. A few described questioning aspects of the justice system they had never challenged before. For correctional officers, the witness room becomes a place where professional identity collides with personal morality. The chaplains. Chaplains serve a very different purpose. They stand closest to the emotional core of the moment, offering spiritual guidance, prayer, or comfort to those involved. Their psychological burden comes from their role as caregivers in a setting where care feels limited. One chaplain, who later spoke in a restorative justice forum, described the emotional atmosphere as spiritually heavy. He said he felt the weight of every person in the room, victims, families, officers, even the inmate's emotional state before the event. Chaplains often enter the witness room carrying empathy, and empathy becomes both a gift and a burden. A clinical psychologist who studied chaplaincy stress called this empathetic saturation, the point where absorbing others' emotional pain becomes overwhelming. Many chaplains rely on faith to ground themselves. Others admit that the experience challenges their beliefs. Among the 26 witnesses, the chaplains were the ones who described the moment in spiritual terms, not because of the event itself, but because of the emotional intensity surrounding it. The victim family members. Victim family members are told that witnessing the execution may bring closure. But research contradicts this expectation. One mother, whose daughter was murdered, attended with the hope of feeling something she could not articulate: relief, justice, maybe peace. Instead, she later described experiencing a wave of complex emotions that made closure feel farther away, not closer. In published psychological testimonies, many family members describe emotional numbness, a sudden resurfacing of grief, confusion about their feelings, unexpected sorrow, the sense of emotional dislocation. Criminologists call this traumatic incongruence, when the outcome doesn't match the emotional expectation. One father, interviewed for a victim support project, said he realized afterward that no state action could rebuild the life he lost. "I walked out with the same grief I walked in with," he said, "but with a new layer I didn't expect." Witnessing did not erase the wound. It added a new memory to it. The inmate family members. When inmate families are permitted to attend, their experiences are often emotionally overwhelming. One mother, speaking in a public statement, described the witness room as a place where time collapses. She said she felt both present and distant, held between disbelief and heartbreak. Psychologists characterize this as acute emotional shock, a state where the mind struggles to process rapidly shifting emotions. Another relative described dissociating, feeling as though she were standing outside her own body, watching the moment unfold from somewhere else. This protective mental response is common in overwhelming situations. For inmate families, the witness room becomes a place of irreversible separation, marked not by physical details but by the emotional gravity of finality. The legal observers. Legal observers attend to ensure protocol, fairness, and procedural integrity. Their focus is on the rules, not the emotions. But the emotions still find them. One legal observer described the moment as the point where legal theory becomes human reality. He said he expected to feel analytical, but instead felt a tightness in his chest, a moment of acute awareness that he was witnessing something he had only ever encountered in documents and arguments. Law school journals document similar reactions. Moral ambiguity, cognitive dissonance, intellectual conflict, emotional detachment that cracks afterward. Legal observers often try to compartmentalize the experience. But the witness room has a way of penetrating the compartment. The collective psychology of witnessing. Across all 26 witnesses, researchers found consistent psychological patterns. Not because they saw a graphic event, they did not, and this documentary does not describe one, but because of the emotional meaning behind witnessing a state-imposed ending. Common reactions include sleeplessness or restless nights, emotional numbness, heightened tension or irritability, a sudden sadness or mood shifts, a difficulty explaining the experience to others, a sense of moral complexity or questioning. These reactions are not signs of weakness. They are signs of humanity. Psychologists emphasize that witnessing an execution, regardless of personal beliefs, places individuals inside a moment of immense emotional gravity. The mind reacts not to visuals, but to meaning. The emotional weight comes not from what they see, but from what the moment symbolizes. The silence outside the room. Once the witnesses leave the room, they are usually escorted down a corridor and out of the facility. No counseling, no debriefing, no structured support. For most of them, the experience becomes something they carry privately. A researcher studying witness experiences wrote, "The justice system documents the procedure. It does not document the psychological impact on the people who watch." Several witnesses admitted they avoided talking about it afterward because they didn't know how. Others felt that describing their emotions might be seen as inappropriate, unprofessional, or disrespectful to the families involved. The silence becomes its own form of burden. The societal question. The emotional weight on witnesses raises a deep and rarely asked question. What does it mean for a society to require ordinary people to stand inside these rooms? Legal experts argue that transparency is essential to prevent secrecy and abuse. Psychologists argue that emotional support should be mandatory for anyone exposed to such moments. Criminologists argue that witness reactions reflect the broader moral tensions surrounding capital punishment. The debate continues in courtrooms, legislative hearings, ethics panels, and academic journals. But while policymakers discuss procedures, the human impact on witnesses remains largely invisible. Until now. The true cost of witnessing. The true cost is not measured in images or details. It is measured in the journalist who sits in her car afterward, unable to drive. The officer who lies awake the night before. The chaplain who feels spiritually drained. The victim's parent whose grief resurfaces unexpectedly. The inmate's mother who stands in silent disbelief. The legal observer whose theories crack under emotional reality. These reactions do not sensationalize. They humanize. They show that the justice system does not operate in isolation. It affects everyone who touches it, even briefly. As the documentary closes, imagine the witness room now empty. The chairs are pushed back. The lights hum softly. The silence hangs in the air, heavy but unoccupied. The 26 witnesses have gone home. To families. To quiet houses. To late-night thoughts. To memories they did not ask for and cannot fully explain. They stepped into that room because the justice system required them to. But they walked out carrying something the system does not measure. The emotional weight of witnessing a moment where a human life ends by state authority. It is a weight that lingers in the mind long after the event has faded from the public's attention. A weight that reveals something profound about justice, humanity, and the unseen cost of accountability. This is the story of the people the world never sees. The witnesses, the silent observers, the individuals who stand behind the glass and leave with memories shaped not by graphic detail, but by emotional gravity. A story not about how an execution happens, but about how being present changes the people who watch.